The crimson sky of Kepler 442b burned like molten copper as the transport ships descended through the alien atmosphere. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the viewport, watching the jagged mountain ranges grow larger with each passing second. Her Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle lay secured beside her, its familiar weight a comfort in the unknown territory ahead. Theor. 480 Marines of the 3rd Expeditionary Battalion had been deployed to this distant world after long-range scouts detected massive energy signatures beneath the planet's surface. What they found waiting for them would test every limit of human endurance and ingenuity. As the first boots touched alien soil, Elena felt the planet's heavier gravity pulling at her equipment. The air tasted metallic through her helmet's filtration system, and strange purple vegetation swayed in winds that carried unfamiliar scents. The landing zone stretched across a vast plateau surrounded by towering cliff faces that rose like ancient sentinels into the rust-colored sky. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system as the Marines established their perimeter. Intel suggests the energy source is located approximately 15 kilometers northeast, buried deep within the mountain complex. We're here to investigate and secure whatever technology is generating those readings. Elena positioned herself on a rocky outcrop that offered excellent sight lines across the landing zone. Through her scope, she could see her fellow Marines moving with practiced efficiency, setting up defensive positions and unloading heavy equipment from the transports. The alien landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, its beauty both mesmerizing and unsettling. The first sign of trouble came 3 hours after planetfall. Elena's enhanced optics picked up movement along the distant ridgelines, shapes that didn't match the natural rock formations. She adjusted her scope's magnification and felt her blood run cold. Thousands of sleek insectoid forms were emerging from hidden positions throughout the mountain complex. The aliens moved with terrifying coordination, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the alien sunlight. Each creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 powerful limbs and mandibles that could easily tear through human armor. But what made Elena's hands tighten on her rifle were the energy weapons they carried, devices that pulsed with the same strange signatures the scouts had detected. Contact. Multiple hostiles approaching from all vectors, Elena reported through her comm, her voice steady despite the overwhelming numbers she was observing. I count at least 10,000, possibly more. They're using the mountain terrain for cover and advancing in coordinated formations. Captain Morrison's response was immediate. All units, defensive positions. Prepare for contact. This is not a drill. The alien force moved like a tide of death across the landscape, emerging from caves and crevices that had been invisible during the initial survey. Elena realized with growing dread that the Marines had landed directly in the middle of what appeared to be a massive alien military installation. The energy signatures hadn't been from abandoned technology. They were from an active alien civilization that viewed the human presence as an invasion. As the first energy bolts began striking the Marine perimeter, Elena took her first shot. The .50 caliber round found its mark, dropping one of the alien commanders in a shower of blue ichor. But for every alien that fell, 10 more seemed to take its place. The Marines were hopelessly outnumbered, and their extraction point was now completely surrounded. The battle for survival on Kepler 442b had begun, and Elena Vasquez would soon discover that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most desperate circumstances. The alien energy weapons carved through the morning air like deadly lightning, each blast leaving molten scars in the rocky ground where Marines had been standing moments before. Elena watched through her scope as her fellow soldiers scrambled for cover behind makeshift barriers of supply crates and damaged transport vehicles. The creatures they faced moved unlike anything in human military databases. Their 4-limbed bodies allowed them to navigate the treacherous mountain terrain with spider-like agility, scaling vertical cliff faces and leaping between rock formations with ease. Elena had counted over 15,000 of them now, their numbers seeming to grow with each passing hour as more emerged from the vast underground network beneath the mountains. Vasquez, I need you to start picking off their heavy weapon operators. Captain Morrison's voice came through the comm, strain evident despite his efforts to remain calm. Those plasma cannons are tearing through our defensive positions. Elena adjusted her position on the rocky outcrop, using the natural stone formations for concealment. Her training at the Marine Scout Sniper School had prepared her for long-range engagements, but nothing quite like this. The alien's anatomy was completely foreign, requiring her to adapt her targeting on the fly. Through careful observation, she noticed that the creatures seemed to have a central nervous cluster, located where their upper torso met their elongated head section. Her first few shots confirmed this weakness, each successful hit dropping an alien instantly. But the plasma cannon operators were positioned far behind the main assault force, nearly 2 kilometers away on elevated positions. The Barrett's .50 caliber rounds were more than capable of reaching that distance, but the alien atmosphere created unpredictable wind patterns that made precision shooting extremely challenging. Elena found herself calculating not just for distance and wind, but for the planet's stronger gravitational pull and the different air density. As she lined up her first shot on a plasma cannon operator, Elena noticed something that made her pause. The aliens weren't just attacking randomly, they were implementing sophisticated military tactics. They had divided their forces into coordinated assault groups, with some units providing covering fire while others advanced under that protection. Their communication seemed to be conducted through rapid color changes in their chitinous shells, creating a visual language that allowed silent coordination across vast distances. Elena's shot rang out across the battlefield, and the alien heavy weapons operator crumpled. But instead of the chaotic response she expected, the remaining aliens immediately began implementing countermeasures. They started using smoke-like substances that obscured vision, and their advance became more unpredictable, with random pattern changes that made targeting extremely difficult. "These things are learning from our tactics in real time," Elena reported to Captain Morrison. "They're adapting faster than anything we've encountered before." The situation grew more desperate as the hours passed. The Marines' ammunition supplies were dwindling, and several defensive positions had been overrun despite fierce resistance. The alien forces had effectively surrounded the entire landing zone, cutting off any possibility of extraction or retreat. Elena continued her deadly work from her elevated position, but she could see the inevitable outcome approaching. The Marines were running out of time, ammunition, and options. The alien technology seemed vastly superior to human weaponry, with energy shields that could deflect most conventional rounds and weapons that could melt through armor like butter. As the alien sunset began painting the sky in deeper shades of crimson, Elena realized that traditional military tactics weren't going to save them. The Marines needed something unexpected, something that would turn their desperate situation into an advantage. And as she studied the alien formations through her scope, an idea began forming in her mind, one that would require her to leave the safety of her sniper position and venture into the heart of enemy territory. Elena's plan formed as she watched the alien command structure operate throughout the day. Unlike human military organization, the aliens seemed to rely on a central coordination node located deep within the mountain complex. She had observed how their color-based communication always traced back to a specific peak where brilliant flashes of bioluminescent signals originated. "Captain Morrison, I need to speak with you privately," Elena transmitted on a secure channel as darkness began to fall across the alien landscape. "Make it quick, Vasquez. We're down to 30% ammunition and these things aren't giving us any breathing room." Elena outlined her observations about the alien command structure. "Sir, I believe I can reach their command center. If I can disrupt their coordination, it might give us the opening we need." "Negative, Staff Sergeant. That's a suicide mission. You'd have to cross 15 kilometers of enemy territory alone, scale a vertical mountain face, and somehow infiltrate what's likely their most heavily defended position. With respect, sir, staying here is also suicide. We'll be overrun within 12 hours at this rate, but if I can break their command structure, they might revert to individual unit tactics instead of this coordinated assault." Elena had studied the alien movement patterns for hours. She noticed that individual aliens became significantly less effective when separated from the main group communication network. Their attacks became more predictable, their formations less coordinated. If she could sever that connection at its source, the Marines might have a fighting chance. Captain Morrison was quiet for several minutes as energy bolts continued to rain down around their positions. Finally, his voice came through the comm with grim resignation. "What do you need?" Elena's equipment loadout was carefully calculated. Along with her Barrett rifle, she carried her sidearm, enough ammunition for both weapons, demolition charges, night vision equipment, and enough rations for a 3-day mission. But most importantly, she carried something the aliens hadn't encountered yet: pure human determination combined with improvised tactics. As the alien night fell, Elena began her journey. The creatures seemed to have reduced nighttime activity, relying more on thermal sensing than visual hunting. Elena used this to her advantage, moving through areas where the volcanic activity in the mountains created thermal signatures that masked her own body heat. The terrain was treacherous even without enemy contact. The alien gravity made every step more taxing than normal, and the rocky ground seemed designed to catch boots and twist ankles. Strange nocturnal creatures emerged from crevices in the rocks, their glowing eyes tracking her movement. But they seemed more curious than threatening. Elena's first major obstacle came 5 kilometers from the marine perimeter. An alien patrol of 12 creatures was systematically searching the area, their energy weapons sweeping back and forth in coordinated patterns. Elena studied their search pattern for 20 minutes before identifying a gap in their coverage. Moving like a ghost through the alien landscape, Elena slipped past the patrol using techniques learned from years of reconnaissance training. But this was unlike any environment she had trained for. The alien rocks had different acoustic properties and sounds carried in unexpected ways. She had to completely relearn stealth movement on the fly. As she climbed higher into the mountains, Elena began to understand the true scope of the alien civilization. The mountains weren't just hiding a military installation. They were home to an entire underground society. Faint lights emanated from deep within the rock faces, and she could hear the distant sounds of massive machinery operating far below the surface. The realization hit her that humanity hadn't just stumbled upon an alien outpost. They had landed in the middle of what appeared to be the capital of an advanced civilization. The energy signatures the scouts had detected weren't weapons or technology caches. They were the power sources for an entire alien city built within the mountains. Elena pressed forward, knowing that this knowledge made her mission even more critical. If the aliens viewed the human presence as an invasion of their homeland, they would fight with the desperate fury of defenders rather than mere territorial aggressors. The Marines weren't just outnumbered. They were fighting for survival against an entire civilization protecting their home. 8 hours into her solitary mission, Elena reached the base of the command peak. The mountain face rose nearly vertical for over 1,000 meters, its surface dotted with alien structures that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, intricate organic architecture that seemed to grow directly from the living rock. Elena's climbing equipment had been designed for Earth conditions, but she adapted quickly to the alien environment. The stronger gravity actually helped in some ways, providing better grip strength, though it made each upward movement more exhausting. The alien rock formations offered unexpected handholds, as if the mountain itself had been modified to facilitate climbing. As she ascended, Elena began to intercept fragments of alien communication. The bioluminescent signals weren't random. They were a complex language of light patterns that conveyed tactical information across vast distances. She couldn't understand the meaning, but she could see the information flow, tracing the communication pathways like a vast neural network. Halfway up the mountain face, Elena encountered her first major security system. Energy barriers flickered across sections of the cliff, creating deadly zones that would vaporize anything attempting to pass through. But Elena noticed that the barriers operated on timed cycles, probably to allow authorized alien personnel to move through the area. Elena timed the cycles carefully, discovering that each barrier deactivated for exactly 17 seconds every 4 minutes. It was barely enough time to traverse the protected zones, but it was possible for someone with Elena's training and physical conditioning. She began her sprint across the first barrier zone as soon as the energy field disappeared. The climb became increasingly dangerous as she ascended. Alien sensors occasionally swept the mountain face with beams of coherent light, forcing Elena to remain perfectly still while pressed against the rock surface. On several occasions, alien patrols passed within meters of her position, their 4-limbed forms moving with silent efficiency along concealed pathways carved into the mountain. Elena's breakthrough came when she discovered that the alien sensors were calibrated to detect movement patterns consistent with their own species. By modifying her climbing technique to avoid the specific motion signatures that triggered the detection systems, she could move through areas that should have been impossible to penetrate. As she neared the command center, Elena realized the true sophistication of what she was infiltrating. The alien facility wasn't just a military installation, it was a masterpiece of bioengineering. The structures seemed to be partially alive, responding to the presence of alien personnel and adapting to environmental conditions in real time. The command center itself was located within a massive crystalline dome that crowned the mountain peak. Through her scope, Elena could see dozens of aliens working at what appeared to be organic computer interfaces, their hands interfacing directly, with living tissue that processed information at incredible speeds. Elena positioned herself at a vantage point overlooking the command center and began studying the facility's layout. The dome was protected by multiple layers of energy shielding, but Elena noticed that the shields had blind spots where the mountain's natural rock formations created interference patterns. More importantly, she identified what appeared to be the central communication node, a massive organic structure that pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns she had observed throughout her climb. All of the facility's communication pathways converged on this single point, making it the perfect target for disruption. Elena's demolition charges had been designed for conventional targets, but she began calculating how to adapt them for this organic technology. The alien bioengineering was based on principles completely foreign to human science, but Elena realized that all communication systems, regardless of their origin, had fundamental vulnerabilities. As she prepared for the final phase of her mission, Elena received a transmission from Captain Morrison. The situation at the marine perimeter had deteriorated further. They were down to less than 300 effective personnel, and alien forces were preparing for what appeared to be a final coordinated assault. Elena checked her chronometer. She had less than 6 hours before the Marines would be completely overrun. The success of her mission would determine whether 480 human beings lived to see another sunrise, or whether humanity's first contact with an alien civilization would end in complete disaster. 8 hours into her solitary mission, Elena reached the base of the command peak. The mountain face rose nearly vertical for over 1,000 meters, its surface dotted with alien structures that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, intricate organic architecture that seemed to grow directly from the living rock. Elena's climbing equipment had been designed for Earth conditions, but she adapted quickly to the alien environment. The stronger gravity actually helped in some ways, providing better grip strength, though it made each upward movement more exhausting. The alien rock formations offered unexpected handholds, as if the mountain itself had been modified to facilitate climbing. As she ascended, Elena began to intercept fragments of alien communication. The bioluminescent signals weren't random. They were a complex language of light patterns that conveyed tactical information across vast distances. She couldn't understand the meaning, but she could see the information flow, tracing the communication pathways like a vast neural network. Halfway up the mountain face, Elena encountered her first major security system. Energy barriers flickered across sections of the cliff, creating deadly zones that would vaporize anything attempting to pass through. But Elena noticed that the barriers operated on timed cycles, probably to allow authorized alien personnel to move through the area. Elena timed the cycles carefully, discovering that each barrier deactivated for exactly 17 seconds every 4 minutes. It was barely enough time to traverse the protected zones, but it was possible for someone with Elena's training and physical conditioning. She began her sprint across the first barrier zone as soon as the energy field disappeared. The climb became increasingly dangerous as she ascended. Alien sensors occasionally swept the mountain face with beams of coherent light, forcing Elena to remain perfectly still while pressed against the rock surface. On several occasions, alien patrols passed within meters of her position, their four-limbed forms moving with silent efficiency along concealed pathways carved into the mountain. Elena's breakthrough came when she discovered that the alien sensors were calibrated to detect movement patterns consistent with their own species. By modifying her climbing technique to avoid the specific motion signatures that triggered the detection systems, She could move through areas that should have been impossible to penetrate. As she neared the command center, Elena realized the true sophistication of what she was infiltrating. The alien facility wasn't just a military installation, it was a masterpiece of bioengineering. The structures seemed to be partially alive, responding to the presence of alien personnel and adapting to environmental conditions in real time. The command center itself was located within a massive crystalline dome that crowned the mountain peak. Through her scope, Elena could see dozens of aliens working at what appeared to be organic computer interfaces, their hands interfacing directly with living tissue that processed information at incredible speeds. Elena positioned herself at a vantage point overlooking the command center and began studying the facility's layout. The dome was protected by multiple layers of energy shielding, but Elena noticed that the shields had blind spots where the mountain's natural rock formations created interference patterns. More importantly, she identified what appeared to be the central communication node, a massive organic structure that pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns she had observed throughout her climb. All of the facility's communication pathways converged on this single point, making it the perfect target for disruption. Elena's demolition charges had been designed for conventional targets, but she began calculating how to adapt them for this organic technology. The alien bioengineering was based on principles completely foreign to human science, but Elena realized that all communication systems, regardless of their origin, had fundamental vulnerabilities. As she prepared for the final phase of her mission, Elena received a transmission from Captain Morrison. The situation at the marine perimeter had deteriorated further. They were down to less than 300 effective personnel, and alien forces were preparing for what appeared to be a final coordinated assault. Elena checked her chronometer. She had less than 6 hours before the Marines would be completely overrun. The success of her mission would determine whether 480 human beings lived to see another sunrise, or whether humanity's first contact with an alien civilization would end in complete disaster. Elena's infiltration of the command dome required every skill she had learned during her military career. The bioorganic walls seemed to pulse with awareness, responding to the slightest vibration or temperature change. She moved with the patience of a predator, each step calculated to avoid triggering the facility's living security systems. Inside the dome, Elena discovered technology that challenged everything she thought she knew about warfare and communication. The aliens interfaced directly with their equipment through neural connections, their thoughts becoming commands that flowed through the organic computer networks like electrical impulses through a nervous system. The central communication node dominated the facility's interior space. It stood nearly 20 meters tall, its surface constantly shifting with waves of bioluminescent information that pulsed outward to relay stations throughout the mountain complex. Elena realized she was looking at the brain of the entire alien military operation. But as she studied the node more carefully, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. The organic patterns flowing across its surface weren't just military communications. They included civilian traffic, family communications, and what appeared to be educational or cultural exchanges. This wasn't just a military command center. It was the communication hub for an entire civilization. Elena faced a terrible choice. Destroying the node would cripple the alien military forces and save her fellow Marines. But it would also cut off communications for what might be millions of alien civilians. She was looking at the equivalent of destroying Earth's entire internet infrastructure to stop a single military operation. As she wrestled with this moral dilemma, Elena noticed something in the communication patterns that made her pause. Among the flowing streams of alien data, she began to recognize what appeared to be casualty reports, evacuation orders, and what could only be described as expressions of fear and confusion. The aliens weren't just coordinating an attack on the Marines, they were responding to what they perceived as an invasion of their homeworld. From their perspective, armed humans had descended from space and established a military beachhead in the heart of their territory. They were fighting to protect their families and their civilization. Elena realized that humanity's first contact with an alien species had gone catastrophically wrong due to a fundamental misunderstanding. The Marines had been sent to investigate energy signatures, not realizing they were landing in the middle of an inhabited world. The aliens had responded with military force because they believed they were under attack. But understanding the situation didn't change the immediate reality. The Marines were still surrounded and facing annihilation, and Elena still needed to find a way to save them without committing what amounted to genocide against an alien civilian population. Elena began studying the communication patterns more intensively, looking for a solution that didn't involve mass destruction. She noticed that certain frequencies seemed to carry priority commands that could override other signals. If she could access those priority channels, she might be able to send her own messages through the alien communication network. Using her technical training and improvised field modifications, Elena began jury-rigging her equipment to interface with the alien systems. The process was incredibly dangerous. One wrong connection could electrocute her or trigger every security system in the facility simultaneously. As she worked, Elena became aware that she was being watched. An alien had entered the chamber, but instead of raising an alarm, it seemed to be studying her actions with what appeared to be curiosity rather than hostility. The creature's bioluminescent patches were flickering in patterns that seemed almost like questioning, rather than aggressive posturing. Elena made a decision that would either save both species or doom them all. Instead of completing her sabotage mission, she began attempting to establish communication with the alien observer. Using hand gestures, mathematical symbols drawn in the dust, and careful body language, Elena tried to convey that she wasn't there to destroy their facility. The alien's response shocked her. It began mimicking her gestures, apparently recognizing her attempt at communication. More importantly, its bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Elena intuitively understood as expressions of confusion and concern rather than aggression. Elena realized she might have found humanity's first real chance at peaceful contact with an alien civilization, but time was running out for her fellow Marines. She needed to find a way to communicate the urgency of the situation and propose a solution that would save both human and alien lives. The alien creature Elena faced stood nearly 8 feet tall, its chitinous exoskeleton shimmering with complex patterns of blue and silver light. What struck Elena most was the intelligence in its multifaceted eyes. This wasn't a mindless insect, but a being capable of reasoning and perhaps empathy. Elena slowly removed her helmet, exposing her human face to the alien atmosphere. The air burned her lungs slightly, but she needed to show trust and vulnerability. The alien's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Elena interpreted as surprise, and it began making soft clicking sounds that might have been its equivalent of speech. Using the dusty floor as a canvas, Elena began drawing simple diagrams. She sketched the solar system, pointing to Earth and then to herself. Then she drew the current planet and pointed to the alien. The creature's light patterns became more intense, and it began adding its own markings to Elena's drawings, creating what appeared to be a star map showing multiple inhabited worlds. Elena's heart raced as she realized the implications. This wasn't just first contact with an alien species. She was communicating with a member of what appeared to be a vast interstellar civilization. Humanity had stumbled into something far beyond their comprehension. The alien seemed to understand Elena's drawings about the conflict situation. It added symbols that Elena interpreted as representing the human landing, the alien military response, and the current siege. But then it drew something that made Elena's blood run cold, symbols that seemed to indicate massive reinforcements approaching from other star systems. Elena tried to communicate the concept of misunderstanding, drawing symbols to show that the humans hadn't come to invade but to explore. The alien's pattern shifted to what Elena hoped was understanding, but then it gestured toward the communication node and made urgent clicking sounds. Elena realized the alien was trying to tell her something crucial about the timing. Through careful observation of its gestures and the patterns on the communication node, Elena understood that the alien reinforcements were only hours away. If the current conflict wasn't resolved before they arrived, the situation would escalate beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. The alien being began manipulating controls on the organic computer interface, and Elena watched as communication channels opened across the network. The creature was apparently some kind of technician or communications specialist, and it seemed to be trying to establish a direct link to the alien military commanders. Elena quickly grabbed her field radio and tuned it to the Marine command frequency. "Captain Morrison, this is Vasquez. I'm in the Alien Command Center. and I think I've found a way to establish communication. Vasquez, what's your status? We're detecting massive energy buildup in the mountains. It looks like they're preparing for a final assault. Sir, the situation is more complex than we thought. This isn't just a military installation. It's a civilian communications hub for their entire civilization. They think we're invading their homeworld. Elena worked with the alien technician to establish a three-way communication link. The process was awkward and full of misunderstandings, but gradually a form of rudimentary translation began to emerge. The aliens' bioluminescent patterns could be converted into mathematical concepts, which could then be translated into basic human language. The first successful exchange was simple but profound. The alien communicated what Elena understood as, "Why do you attack our nest home?" Elena responded through her improvised translation system. "We came to learn, not to fight. We didn't know you lived here." The alien's pattern shifted to what Elena interpreted as confusion and concern. Through the communication link, Elena began to understand the alien perspective. They had detected the human ships approaching and had attempted to send warning signals, but the humans had either not recognized the signals or had misinterpreted them as threats. Elena realized that the alien military response had been purely defensive. They had been trying to protect their underground cities and civilian populations from what they perceived as an aggressive invasion force. The energy weapons and coordinated attacks had been their equivalent of activating planetary defense systems, but time was running out. Elena could see through the facility's monitoring systems that alien reinforcements from other worlds were approaching the system. Once they arrived, the situation would become impossible to resolve peacefully. Elena needed to convince both sides to stand down before interstellar war became inevitable. Working frantically with the alien technician, Elena began broadcasting messages to both the Marine forces and the alien military commanders, trying to establish a ceasefire that would allow for proper first contact protocols to be established.